I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. Get your things and get out of this house immediately. Don't tell your children anything. Ethan Rodriguez's words echoed in my ears as I stared out my kitchen window. The morning had started so routinely, just like any other day of my quiet widowhood. My coffee steamed in my favorite mug, the white porcelain one with little flowers that had belonged to my mother. Sunbeams filtered through the curtains, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. My home was my sanctuary. Every corner held a story, every object a memory. The cream-colored walls I had painted myself 3 years ago, the dark wood furniture inherited from my parents, the family photos decorating the fireplace mantel. Dylan had left early for work, as always. My oldest son had developed a habit of disappearing before dawn and returning after dark. He worked as a manager at a construction company, though lately he seemed more tired and distant than usual. His eyes avoided mine during our rare shared dinners. Haley, my younger daughter, had moved back home 6 months ago after her divorce. 34 years old and back in the nest, bringing with her 2 suitcases and a sadness that seemed to cling to her skin like a second layer. She spent hours locked in her old room, emerging only for quick meals before shutting herself away again. I understood grief intimately. I had lost my husband Richard 7 years ago, and for a long time my world had fallen apart. But my children had been there, holding me up when I thought I couldn't go on. So when they needed me, I opened my arms and my home without questions. Our routine had become predictable. I'd wake at 6:00, make breakfast that no one ate, water the plants, clean the house, watch the news, prepare lunch that no one shared with me, read a book, and make dinner that we ate in uncomfortable silence. The days blurred into one another like watercolors in the rain. But that morning, something changed. The upstairs bathroom faucet had started dripping during the night. It wasn't a normal drip, but something strange, as if the water was coming from somewhere it shouldn't. When I came down for breakfast, I noticed a damp spot on the dining room ceiling directly below the upstairs bathroom. Water was seeping through, forming a small drop that fell onto the table every few seconds. It was peculiar because the bathroom had been renovated just 2 years ago. Dylan had insisted on replacing all the plumbing, hiring a full team of workers who occupied the house for weeks. I called Dylan at work to ask what I should do. His voice sounded tense when he answered, as if I had interrupted something important. "Mom, just call a plumber. I can't leave work right now." "But shouldn't we check the warranty on the renovation? We just had everything fixed recently." No, it's better to call someone new. I'll send you the number of a plumber I know." His answer seemed odd. Why wouldn't he want us to contact the company that did the original work? Half an hour later, I received a text message with the name and number of Ethan Rodriguez Plumbing, who, according to Dylan, had excellent references. I dialed immediately. A calm, professional voice answered. "Good morning. This is Ethan Rodriguez. How can I help you?" "I have a leak in my ceiling. It seems to be coming from the upstairs bathroom. Could you come take a look?" "Of course, ma'am. I can be there in about an hour if that works for you." I gave him the details and hung up, feeling relieved. I spent the time waiting by cleaning the kitchen, moving furniture that might get wet, and placing containers to catch the drops. Exactly 1 hour later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to a man in his late 40s, medium height, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses. He wore blue coveralls and carried a toolbox that looked like it had seen many years of honest work. "Mrs. Sanders? I'm Ethan Rodriguez, the plumber." "Yes, please come in. The problem is over here." I led him to the dining room and showed him the spot on the ceiling. He looked up, frowned slightly, and nodded. "I'll need to check the upstairs bathroom first, and then I may need to look at the basement to examine the main pipes." "Of course, make yourself at home." Ethan went upstairs with a confident stride, and soon I heard the sound of his tools at work. After a few minutes, he came down with a thoughtful expression. "Ma'am, I need to check something in the basement." "There's direct access from here, correct?" "Yes, the door is in the kitchen. Do you need me to come with you?" "That's not necessary. I can handle it myself. This might take a while." I nodded and went back to my chores. But something in his tone had made me uneasy. I couldn't say what exactly, but there was a tension in his voice that hadn't been there when he arrived. Ethan disappeared through the basement door, and silence filled the house. I poured myself another cup of coffee and sat in my favorite dining room chair where I could keep an eye on the damp spot on the ceiling. It had stopped dripping, which seemed a good sign. I glanced at the wall clock. It was 11 in the morning. Haley was still asleep, as was usual for her lately. Since her divorce, her sleep schedule had become completely erratic. Sometimes I'd hear her pacing in her room until the early hours of the morning. I worried about her. The noises from the basement continued for almost an hour. Occasionally, I'd hear Ethan moving around in different areas, dragging something, tapping pipes. He was meticulous. I liked that. I decided to make some lunch. Maybe the smell of food would wake Haley, and we could share a meal together. I opened the refrigerator and assessed what I had. Chicken, fresh vegetables, rice. I could make that stew she loved so much as a child. While chopping onions, I remembered the family Sundays from years ago. Richard would sit on the couch reading the newspaper. Dylan would play in the yard with his toy trucks, and Haley would help me in the kitchen. The house was filled with laughter, conversations, life. Now everything was different. The sound of footsteps coming up from the basement interrupted my thoughts. Ethan appeared in the kitchen, but something about his appearance had changed. His face had lost its color, and his hands trembled slightly as he closed his toolbox. "Are you finished? Did you find the problem?" I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. Ethan looked at me strangely, as if he were evaluating something in my face. His eyes darted nervously between me and the basement door. "Mrs. Sanders, I need to talk to you. Can we sit down for a moment?" His tone had changed completely. He no longer sounded like the calm professional who had arrived an hour earlier. "Of course. Is everything all right? Is the leak serious?" "It's not exactly a leak, ma'am." He sat across from me at the kitchen table, placed his tools on the floor, and took off his glasses to clean them nervously. His hands were still shaking. "I don't understand." My stomach tightened with unexpected dread. "Then what's causing the dampness?" Ethan was silent for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he looked me directly in the eyes. "Mrs. Sanders, do you live here alone?" "No, I live with my 2 children, Dylan and Haley. They're both adults, but they've temporarily moved back home." "Why do you ask?" "And they have free access to the basement?" The question seemed strange. "Well, yes, it's their house, too. Why?" Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice as if someone might be listening. "Mrs. Sanders, what I found down there is not a plumbing problem. Someone has installed something in your basement. Something that shouldn't be there." My heart started to beat faster. "What kind of thing?" It's complicated to explain, but what I can tell you is that it's not accidental. Someone put it there on purpose, and that someone knows this house very well." I felt as if the floor was moving beneath my feet. "Are you implying that someone broke into my house to install something in my basement?" "No, ma'am. I don't think it was a stranger." His words hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. "I don't understand. What are you trying to tell me?" Ethan stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. "Ma'am, have you noticed any unusual symptoms lately? Unusual fatigue, headaches, trouble sleeping?" The question took me by surprise. "Well, yes. I've been more tired than usual, and I've had some headaches, but I'm in my 60s. Those things happen as you age." "And your children, have they shown the same symptoms?" I thought for a moment. Now that he mentioned it, I hadn't noticed Dylan or Haley complaining of fatigue or headaches. They both seemed to be in good physical health. No, they seem fine. Ethan nodded gravely. Mrs. Sanders, I need you to listen to me very carefully. The device I found in your basement is connected to this house's ventilation system. Specifically, it's directed towards your bedroom. My bedroom? What does that mean? It means someone has installed a system to release substances into the air you breathe. Substances that could be slowly making you sick. The words seemed to come from far away, as if I were hearing them through a tunnel. They couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen in real life, and definitely not in my house with my family. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. Maybe it's some kind of air purifier installed during the renovation that you don't recognize. Ethan shook his head firmly. Mrs. Sanders, I've been a plumber for over 20 years, and I've done HVAC work for half that time. I've seen all kinds of plumbing, ventilation, and filtration systems. What's in your basement is not an air purifier. It's something else entirely. I got up from the chair, needing to move. This can't be happening. There must be a logical explanation. There is, Ethan said quietly. Someone in this house wants to harm you. His words echoed in my head like funeral bells. I clung to the back of the chair, feeling as if my legs might give out. No, that's impossible. My children would never hurt me. I raised them. I love them. They love me. You must be mistaken. Ethan stood up slowly. Mrs. Sanders, I understand this is hard to accept, but I need you to come with me to the basement so you can see with your own eyes what I found. I shook my head violently. I don't want to see anything. I want you to leave my house right now. Please, he interrupted me in a soft but firm voice. Just 5 minutes. If after seeing what I'm about to show you, you still think I'm wrong, I'll leave immediately. Something in his tone stopped me. He didn't sound like a madman or someone making up stories. He sounded like a man who had seen something terrible and didn't know how to communicate it without destroying someone's world. What exactly did you find down there? It's better if you see it for yourself. Words wouldn't do it justice. I glanced towards the stairs leading to the upper floor where Haley was probably still sleeping. Then I looked at the basement door. All right, I said finally, but only for 5 minutes. Ethan nodded and took a flashlight from his toolbox. You're going to need this. The lighting isn't very good in that area. I followed Ethan to the basement door, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. We went down the wooden stairs that creaked under our feet. The basement had the familiar smell of dampness and age. Cardboard boxes were stacked against the walls, the washer and dryer in their usual corner, the gardening tools hanging neatly. Everything seemed normal. Over here, Ethan whispered, heading towards the farthest corner of the basement behind the furnace. I followed him, my eyes slowly adjusting to the dim light. Ethan turned on his flashlight and aimed it at a section of the wall I rarely visited. At first, I saw nothing unusual. What am I supposed to be looking at? Look closer, behind those pipes. I followed the beam of his flashlight and then I saw it. Tucked between the normal plumbing pipes was something that definitely didn't belong there. A series of thinner tubes made of what looked like specialized plastic connected to a metal box the size of a small microwave. What is that? Come closer. I moved in and Ethan aimed the light directly at the device. Now I could see that it had several compartments. Some contained liquids of different colors. Others had what looked like digital timers with flashing red numbers. This is connected to your house's ventilation system, Ethan explained in a low voice. Specifically, these tubes go up and connect to the air ducts that lead directly to your bedroom. I touched one of the tubes with trembling fingers. It was warm, as if it had been running recently. What kind of liquids are those? I'm not a chemist, but from the smell and consistency, I'd say they are substances designed to cause gradual effects on whoever inhales them. Chronic fatigue, a weakened immune system, maybe something more serious over time. My mind refused to fully process what I was seeing. But this requires technical knowledge, specialized installation. It's not something anyone can do in an afternoon. Exactly. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing, and they had unlimited access to your house for as long as it took. I remembered the bathroom renovation from 2 years ago. The workers had been in the house for weeks. Dylan had personally supervised the entire project. "The renovation," I whispered. "During the bathroom renovation, there were workers here constantly." "Who supervised that renovation?" I didn't want to answer. I didn't want my suspicions confirmed with words. "My son Dylan. He took care of everything." Ethan nodded gravely. "Mrs. Sanders, this system wasn't installed in 2 days. It required planning, purchasing specific materials, and someone with knowledge of ventilation and basic chemistry." Nausea rose in my throat. "Dylan works in construction management. He would know how to do this. And Haley studied chemistry in college before she got married." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in a horrible, perfect way. The symptoms I had been experiencing for months, the constant fatigue, the headaches, the feeling of weakness I had attributed to aging, Dylan's insistence on renovating the bathroom, Haley's sudden return home just as my more serious health problems began. "How long has the system been running?" I asked in a broken voice. Ethan examined the digital timers. From the wear on the components and the amount of residue in the tubes, I'd say at least 8 or 9 months. 9 months, exactly when I had started to feel constantly sick. Exactly when I had started to think that maybe I was developing some age-related illness. "Oh my God," I murmured, leaning against the wall so I wouldn't fall. "Mrs. Sanders, there's something else you need to see." Ethan aimed the flashlight at another angle of the device, revealing a small digital screen displaying numbers and graphs. "This system is programmed to gradually increase the concentration of the substances, which means that over time, the effects become more severe." "More severe? How?" "Without proper medical treatment and with continued exposure, it could be fatal in a few more months." The words hit me like an avalanche. My own children, my own flesh and blood, had been trying to kill me slowly, not in a fit of rage, not in the heat of passion, but in a calculated, systematic way, allowing me to suffer for months before dying. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would they do this?" Ethan turned off the flashlight and gently took my arm to guide me towards the stairs. "That's a question only they can answer. But Mrs. Sanders, you need to get out of this house immediately." We went up in silence. My legs felt like jelly. When we reached the kitchen, reality hit me with renewed force. This was my home, my refuge, the place where I had raised my children, where I had mourned my husband's death, where I had planned to spend my final years in peace. And my children had turned it into my torture chamber. "Mrs. Sanders," Ethan said firmly, "listen to me very carefully. You need to take only the essentials, get out of this house right now, and not tell your children where you're going." "But I can't just leave. This is my house. They are my children." "Your children are trying to murder you," Ethan said with a harshness that surprised me. "There is no conversation worth having with people who have gone this far." I looked towards the stairs leading to the upper floor. Haley was up there, probably just waking up, planning to come down for lunch. My little Haley, who had been such a sweet child, who had comforted me when her father died. "I can't believe she's involved," I said weakly. "Mrs. Sanders, the chemical knowledge needed for this isn't basic. Whoever designed those mixtures knew exactly what effects each substance would have and in what concentrations. Haley had studied chemistry. She had worked in a pharmaceutical lab for years before getting married. I have to talk to them. They have to explain why. Ethan shook his head emphatically. No, ma'am. Once they know you've discovered their plan, they might do something desperate. You need to get to safety first. The silence in the kitchen became deafening. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, and my own ragged breathing. I need to sit down, I murmured, collapsing into one of the kitchen chairs. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I tried to take a sip of my coffee, but the cup rattled so much the liquid spilled. Ethan came over and gently took the cup from my hands. Mrs. Sanders, I understand this is devastating, but every minute you stay in this house is dangerous. Dangerous? They're my children, Mr. Rodriguez. I changed their diapers, comforted them during nightmares, helped them with their homework. How could they want to kill me? My voice broke on the last word. The tears I had been holding back finally burst forth. Ethan sat across from me, his expression serious but understanding. Mrs. Sanders, I've seen a lot of things in my line of work. I've been in houses where families keep terrible secrets. What I found downstairs isn't the work of someone who acted on impulse. It's meticulous, planned, and executed by people who have thought of every detail. But there must be an explanation. Maybe they're being blackmailed, or someone is forcing them. Who could force two adults to install a poisoning system in their own mother's house? And if they were being blackmailed, wouldn't they have come to you for help? His words had a cruel logic I couldn't refute. The money, I whispered suddenly. It has to be about the money. Ethan leaned forward. What money? When Richard died, he left a considerable life insurance policy. Plus, I have a lifetime of savings. And this house, it's worth a lot now that the neighborhood has been gentrified. How much are we talking about? Between the policy, the savings, and the property value, close to $800,000. Ethan nodded gravely. That's a sum that could motivate desperate people to do terrible things. But they aren't desperate. Dylan has a job. Haley will get money from the divorce. Are you sure about that? When was the last time you really talked to them about their financial situations? I thought about that question. The truth was, I hadn't had a deep conversation with either of my children in months. I don't really know how they are financially, I admitted. I just assumed they were fine because they never asked me for help. Maybe because they knew they were going to get all your money another way. The sentence hit me like a slap. I felt physically ill, imagining my children sitting together, planning my death, calculating how long it would take, dividing my possessions before I was even gone. A noise from upstairs startled me. Footsteps on the second floor. Haley was awake. "Mom," she called from upstairs. "Who are you talking to?" Ethan and I looked at each other. I could see the tension in his eyes, the urgency to leave before the situation got more complicated. "Tell her I'm the plumber and I'm almost done," Ethan whispered. "It's the plumber, honey. He's fixing the leak," I shouted up, trying to keep my voice normal. "Okay, I'll be down in a minute." Ethan stood up immediately. "Mrs. Sanders, we need to go now. Do you have your important documents somewhere accessible?" "They're in the safe in my bedroom." "Go get them. Take only what's essential. ID, bank papers, some clothes. I'll wait here to make sure your daughter doesn't come down." I stood up on trembling legs. Every step towards the stairs felt like walking off a cliff. I went up trying to be as quiet as possible, though my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it could be heard throughout the house. My bedroom looked the same as always. The bed perfectly made, family photos on the nightstand. But now I knew that poison was seeping into this space, specifically designed to weaken me until I died. I opened the safe with shaking hands. Inside were my most important documents: my will, the deed to the house, insurance policies, bank information. I took everything and stuffed it into a small handbag. Then I went to the closet and grabbed a few basic items of clothing. As I packed, my eyes fell on a photograph on my dresser. It was from last Christmas, just 8 months ago. Dylan, Haley, and I were smiling in front of the Christmas tree. In that photo, they looked like the loving children I thought they were. But now I knew that by then, they had already started poisoning me. I took the photograph and put it in my bag, not because I wanted to remember that moment, but because I needed to remember that the people closest to us can be the most dangerous. I heard voices downstairs. Haley had come down and was talking to Ethan. Her voice sounded normal, almost cheerful, as if she wasn't a murderer chatting with the man who had uncovered her crime. I went down the stairs as quietly as I could. From the bottom step, I could see Haley in the kitchen, dressed in pink pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. She looked so innocent. "So the problem was the old pipes after all?" she was saying to Ethan. "Exactly," he replied in a professional tone. "It's all fixed now. You shouldn't have any more trouble." What a relief. Mom was so worried about that leak. Haley turned and saw me coming down the stairs with my handbag. "Are you going out, Mom?" The question froze me. How could I lie to her? How could I pretend everything was normal when I knew what she had done? "Yes, I have a few errands to run," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you want me to come with you?" "I don't have any plans today." The offer terrified me. What would happen if I went out with her? "No, that's not necessary. It's just boring bank stuff." Ethan approached with his toolbox. "Well, Mrs. Sanders, my work here is done. You shouldn't have any more problems." I understood it was his way of telling me it was time to go. "How much do I owe you?" I asked, playing along. $60. I took the money from my purse and handed it to him, our eyes meeting for a moment. In his gaze, I saw determination and protection. "Thank you for everything," I said, and the words had a much deeper meaning than Haley could understand. "My pleasure to help, ma'am." Ethan headed for the front door, and I followed. "Are you sure you don't want me to come, Mom? You look a little pale." I turned to look at her one last time. My younger daughter, the baby I had held in my arms, nursed when she had a fever, comforted during childhood nightmares. Now I saw her with completely new eyes, and what I saw terrified me. "I'm fine, dear. I'll be back later." "I love you, Mom," she said with a sweet smile. The words that once would have filled my heart with joy now sounded like poison. "I love you too," I lied, because I didn't know what else to do. I walked out of the house that had been my home for 40 years, not knowing if I would ever return. Once outside, the fresh air hit my face like a revelation. Ethan walked quickly to his truck parked in front of my house, and I followed him. "Get in," he said, opening the passenger door. "We need to get away from here before your daughter suspects anything." I got into the vehicle, clutching my handbag to my chest like a life raft. Ethan started the engine, and we began to drive away from my neighborhood. I looked in the side mirror and saw my house growing smaller in the distance. "Where are we going?" I asked in a hoarse voice. "To a safe place where we can think clearly," Ethan replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "There's a coffee shop about 20 blocks from here. We can sit down, talk about the next steps, and call the authorities." "The authorities? You mean the police?" "Yes, ma'am. What we discovered constitutes attempted murder. This isn't something we can handle on our own." The word murder echoed in my head. My children weren't just ungrateful or greedy. They were potential killers. "I can't believe this is real," I murmured, staring out the window at the familiar streets that now felt strange and threatening. "I know it's hard to process, Mrs. Sanders, but you made the right decision by leaving that house." "What if we're wrong? What if there's an explanation we're not seeing?" Ethan glanced at me briefly. "Mrs. Sanders, I installed ventilation systems for 15 years before focusing on plumbing. What I saw in your basement is not a mistake. It's not a misunderstanding. It is a device specifically designed to disperse chemical substances into the air of your room. There is no innocent explanation for that. I knew he was right, but my mind kept desperately searching for an alternate reality where my children weren't monsters. How much time do you think would have passed before it worked? Based on the timers and the concentration I saw, I'd say you had maybe 2 or 3 more months. Your symptoms would have gradually worsened until it looked like a natural illness. You probably would have developed severe respiratory problems, vital organ failure. You would have died slowly, and no one would have suspected anything strange. Tears welled up in my eyes again. How can 2 people plan something like that? How can they look their mother in the face every day, fake love while they're killing her? I don't have an answer for that, Mrs. Sanders. But what I do know is that people capable of this are not going to stop just because you confront them. If they find out you know the truth, they might speed up their plans or try something more direct. The thought terrified me. You think they'll look for me? It depends on how desperate they are for the money and how committed they are to their original plan. Twist 1. The plumber discovers the poisoning system in the basement. We arrived at the coffee shop, a cozy little place with wooden tables and the aroma of fresh coffee. Ethan chose a table in the back, away from the windows and near a rear exit. Mrs. Sanders, we need to talk about your options. The first is to call the police immediately and report what we found. And what would happen then? They would go to your house with a search warrant, examine the device, and arrest your children if they find enough evidence. The idea of seeing Dylan and Haley in handcuffs, being taken away in a police car, turned my stomach. What's the second option? We could document everything ourselves first, take pictures, get samples of the chemicals, build a solid case before involving the authorities. Would that mean going back to the house? Not necessarily. I could go back under the pretext of checking that the repair worked correctly. I could take photographic evidence of the device. The waitress brought our coffees and a slice of chocolate cake I hadn't ordered but was grateful for. But why would you do that for me? You don't even know me. Ethan took a sip of his coffee before answering. Mrs. Sanders, I lost my mother 5 years ago. She died of cancer, but for months before her diagnosis, she complained of strange symptoms that doctors couldn't explain. It was only after she died that we discovered my brother had been stealing money from her bank accounts and tampering with her medication. Oh my God. I couldn't save my mother because I didn't see the signs in time. But when I saw what was happening in your house, I knew I had a second chance to do the right thing. His words moved me deeply. Here was a stranger risking his time and possibly his safety to help an elderly woman he had just met that morning. Was your brother arrested? Yes, but not for the physical harm he caused my mother, only for the theft. By the time we found out about the medication, it was too late to prove it contributed to her death. That's why you want to help me gather solid evidence. Exactly. I don't want your children to escape the consequences of what they've done. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Haley. Mom, is everything okay? You've been out longer than usual. I showed the message to Ethan. His expression hardened. They're already monitoring your movements. Text her back that you're fine, but you got held up at the bank. I typed the reply Ethan suggested, my fingers trembling on the screen. This means we need to act fast, Ethan said after I sent the message. Once they suspect something is wrong, they could get rid of the device and destroy all the evidence. Climax 1. Barbara must leave her home with minimal possessions, her entire reality shattered. What do you suggest we do? I'll go back to your house this afternoon under the pretext of checking for any additional leaks. I'll take detailed pictures of the device and, if possible, samples of the chemicals. Then we call the police with solid evidence. And in the meantime, where do I stay? I could take you to a hotel downtown. No one would think to look for you there. Ethan took a card from his wallet and wrote a number on the back. "This is my personal number. Call me immediately if your children try to contact you or if you notice anything strange." I took the card, feeling like it was a lifeline in a turbulent ocean. "Ethan, what will happen if we find out they really are trying to kill me? How will I live knowing that my own children—" "One step at a time, Mrs. Sanders. First, let's make sure you're safe. Then we'll worry about the rest." My phone rang. It was Dylan. "Hi, Mom. Haley says you've been out all day. Is everything okay?" His voice sounded tense, as if he were holding back some emotion. "Yes, honey. I just had things to do." "What kind of things? It's strange you didn't tell us you'd be out for so long." "Since when do I need to report my movements to my children?" I replied, trying to sound normal but firm. There was an awkward pause. "You're right. It's just we worry when you change your routine." "My routine?" The word triggered something in me. "Well, you're normally home in the afternoons. You make dinner at the same time every day." With a chill, I realized they had been monitoring my schedule much more closely than I had noticed. "I have the right to change my routine occasionally," I said. "Of course. Are you going to be home for dinner?" "I'm not sure. I might eat out tonight." Another pause. "Out with whom?" His tone had become more tense. "With a friend," I lied. "What friend? You haven't mentioned plans with friends in months." His interrogation was making me more and more nervous. "Dylan, why so many questions?" "I'm sorry, Mom. It's just you've been acting a little strange lately." "Strange? How?" "More tired, more forgetful. Haley and I have been worried about your health." The irony of his words made me sick. They had caused my fatigue and confusion, and now they were pretending to be concerned about the symptoms they had created. "I'm fine," I said firmly. "Maybe you should see a doctor as a precaution." They wanted me to go to a doctor to document my symptoms, to create a medical history that would support the idea that I was developing a natural illness. "I'll consider it," I said, wanting to end the conversation. "Okay. I love you, Mom. Be careful." "I love you too," I lied, because the words had become automatic after decades of repeating them. After hanging up, I realized my hands were shaking violently. The conversation had confirmed my worst fears. They were not only poisoning me, but they were carefully monitoring my response to the poison, documenting my symptoms, preparing for the final phase of their plan. "We need to get you to that hotel now," Ethan said, seeing my distress. "And I need to get back to your house before they start to suspect anything." As we left the coffee shop, I felt like I was stepping into a new and terrifying world, one where the people I loved most wanted me dead, and a stranger was my only ally. Ethan drove me to the President Hotel downtown. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and anonymous, the kind of place no one would think to look for me. While he spoke with the receptionist, I sat in one of the lobby armchairs, clutching my purse and trying to process the fact that my life had completely changed in a matter of hours. "Room 203, Ethan said, handing me the key card. "It's registered in my name, so if anyone asks for you, they won't find you. How much should I pay you for this?" "Don't worry about that now. We have more important things to deal with." We rode the elevator in silence. The room was small but comfortable. A single bed, a desk, a chair, and a window overlooking the main street. Ethan checked the room carefully, making sure the windows had locks and the door had a deadbolt. "Keep the door locked at all times," he instructed. "Don't open it for anyone but me. If you need anything, call room service." "When are you going back to my house?" "In about an hour. I'll tell them I got a call from another client complaining of similar issues, and I want to verify that my repair at their house is holding up. They won't suspect anything. It's common practice in my profession to double-check complicated jobs." Ethan headed for the door but stopped before leaving. "Mrs. Sanders, there's something I have to ask you. Do you have a will?" The question caught me off guard. "Yes. Why? Are your children the sole beneficiaries? Yes. Everything is split evenly between Dylan and Haley. Ethan nodded gravely. That confirms the motive. With you out of the way, they would immediately inherit a considerable sum. But the will specifies that if my death is suspicious or the result of a crime, they lose all inheritance rights. Are you sure they know that specific clause? I don't know. I made it after Richard died and we never really discussed the details. That could explain why they chose such an elaborate method. If your death appeared natural, the result of a gradual illness, no one would question the will. The calculated coldness of their actions terrified me again. They had not only planned to kill me, but they had planned to do it in a way that guaranteed they would benefit financially from my death. Ethan, what kind of people do this? People who have lost all normal emotional connection. People for whom money has become more important than any family bond. But I raised them to be good people. I taught them values, gave them love. Sometimes, Mrs. Sanders, people turn into something completely different from what we expected. Circumstances, pressures, bad decisions can change someone completely. After Ethan left, I was alone in the hotel room. The silence was overwhelming. For decades, I had been used to the constant noise of a full house. Now, in this silent room, my mind finally had space to fully process what I had discovered. I sat on the bed and took out my phone. I had 3 more messages from Haley. Mom, it's already 4 o'clock. Where are you? Dylan is asking for you. He says you're not answering his calls. I'm starting to worry. Please answer. Mom, I'm really worried. Please call me. Each message sent shivers down my spine. Was she really worried, or was she starting to suspect that something had gone wrong with their plan? I decided to reply, "Everything's fine, dear. The bank was very crowded, and then I went shopping. I'll be back soon." The reply came immediately. "What did you buy? Do you need me to come pick you up?" Her insistence on knowing exactly where I was now seemed sinister rather than considerate. "No need. I have a ride. See you at home." She didn't reply immediately, which was strange. Haley usually answered texts instantly. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes, trying to remember signs I had overlooked. When had all this really started? Had there been moments when I should have suspected something? I remembered a conversation from a few months ago. Dylan had casually mentioned that he thought I should consider moving to a smaller apartment. "This house is too big for one person, Mom," he had said, "and the upkeep must be expensive." At the time, I thought he was worried about my well-being. Now I realized he might have been assessing the property's value. I also remembered Haley asking strange questions about my finances. "Do you have enough money for your medical expenses as you get older, Mom? Have you thought about what you'll do if you need special care?" I had interpreted these questions as normal filial concern. But now I wondered if she was calculating how much money would be left for them after my medical expenses. My phone buzzed with another message from Haley. "Dylan says you're having dinner out. With which friend? We could join you." The idea of being in a restaurant with my 2 children, knowing what I knew now, terrified me. What if they suspected I had discovered their plan? Would they try to do something desperate in public? I didn't answer the message. Instead, I lay on the hotel bed, and for the first time in months, I cried freely. I cried for the betrayal, for the loss of the family I thought I had, for the future I had imagined surrounded by the love of my children. When the tears finally stopped, I realized something had changed in me. The initial shock had given way to a cold determination. My children had chosen to see me as an obstacle to their wealth. Now I had to choose whether I was going to be a victim or a survivor. The phone rang at 6 o'clock in the evening. It was Ethan. "Mrs. Sanders, I have the evidence, but there's something else you need to know. Can you meet me in the hotel lobby in 10 minutes? "What did you mind, Ma?" It's better if we talk in person. And ma'am, prepare yourself for something disturbing." I went down to the lobby with my heart in my throat. Ethan was sitting in the same armchair where I had waited before, but his expression was even more serious than in the morning. He had a folder and a digital camera in his hands. "What happened?" I asked, sitting across from him. "I got detailed pictures of the device," he said, opening the folder. "But while I was documenting everything, I heard your children talking in the kitchen. They stayed there, thinking I was in the basement working." He showed me the photographs. They were clear, detailed images of the system I had seen that morning. The tubes, the chemical containers, the digital timers, everything documented from multiple angles. "These photos are solid evidence," he continued, T. "But what I heard is even more important." "What did you hear?" Ethan leaned forward, lowering his voice, even though we were in a secluded corner of the lobby. "Your son Dylan was telling Haley that you had been acting strangely today, that your answers to their questions were evasive. They already suspected something." "Yes, but there's more. Haley said they needed to speed up the timeline, that they couldn't risk waiting another 2 months. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. Speed up? How? "Dylan mentioned something about Plan B. He said they had a second option that would be quicker but riskier." "What kind of Plan B?" "They didn't give specifics, but Haley mentioned something about making it look like a household accident, a fire or a fall down the stairs. The implications terrified me. If they could no longer kill me slowly with poison, they were willing to resort to more direct and violent methods." Twist 2. Discovery of a meticulous log tracking Barbara's symptoms and health decline. "They also said something about the money," Ethan continued. "Apparently, Dylan has gambling debts of almost $100,000, and Haley isn't going to get anything from the divorce because her ex-husband found out she was having an affair." The pieces of the puzzle fell into place horribly. It wasn't just general greed. They were both financially desperate. Gambling debts? Dylan owes money to loan sharks who aren't exactly understanding about late payments. Haley mentioned they had been pressuring him, threatening physical violence. And Haley's divorce? Apparently, her ex-husband hired a private investigator who documented her infidelity. Under the divorce laws in your state, that means she gets no financial settlement. Suddenly, it all made a horrible kind of sense. Dylan didn't just want my money. He desperately needed it to save his own life. And Haley had lost all hope of financial stability after her divorce. "So they really had no other choice," I murmured. From their perspective, killing me was the only way to solve their problems. That's what I'm afraid of. And now that they suspect something is wrong, they might act impulsively. Ethan took more photos out of the folder. "But there's something else I found. After they finished talking, they went down to the basement together. They wanted to verify that the device was still working correctly." "You followed them?" "I hid in a corner and watched them. Mrs. Sanders, what I saw confirmed that this has been going on for months." He showed me a photo of a notebook he had managed to capture from a distance. Pages filled with dates, times, and handwritten notes. "What is that?" "A detailed log of your response to the poison. Dates when you seemed more tired, when you complained of headaches, when you had trouble sleeping. They've been documenting everything as if it were a science experiment." The photo showed entries like March 15th, Mom complained of dizziness after lunch. March 22nd, slept until 10 o'clock a.m., very unusual. April 3rd, forgot dentist appointment, mental confusion increasing. "They've been monitoring my decline," I whispered, feeling nauseous. "And adjusting the doses based on their observations. Look at this entry from last month." He pointed to a line that read, "Reduce nighttime concentration. Symptoms too obvious. Dylan suggests switching to morning release when she's alone." They were refining the process to make sure no one else noticed what was happening to me. Twist 3. Barbara discovers they've been documenting her mental decline to potentially declare her incompetent. Exactly, but ma'am, there's something even more disturbing. Ethan turned to the next page of photos. It showed a list written in Haley's handwriting. What does it say? It's a list of symptoms they expected you to develop and a timeline for when they planned for each one to appear. I read the list with growing horror. Weeks 1 to 4, general fatigue attributable to aging. Weeks 5 to 8, memory problems, mild confusion. Weeks 9 to 12, respiratory difficulties, physical weakness. Weeks 13 to 16, severe deterioration, possible hospitalization. Weeks 17 to 20, organ failure, apparently natural death. We're in week 14, Ethan said grimly. According to their timeline, you should already be hospitalized, dying slowly, while doctors tried to figure out what mysterious illness had struck you. But I'm still here, I said, feeling a fierce determination growing in my chest. Their perfect plan failed. Yes, but now they know something went wrong, and desperate people do desperate things. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Dylan. Mom, the plumber came back to check his work. He says everything is perfect. When are you coming home? They already know you're not where you should be, Ethan said, reading the message over my shoulder. And they're starting to panic. What do we do now? We call the police immediately. With these photos and what I heard, we have enough evidence to get them arrested. But before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Haley. Answer it, Ethan said, but be very careful what you say. Mom, where are you? Dylan and I are very worried. Her voice sounded different. There was a tension that hadn't been there in previous conversations. I'm fine, dear. Why so worried? It's just the plumber said something strange when he came to check his work. My heart sped up. What did he say? He mentioned you had been asking about ventilation problems in the basement, but you never mentioned any ventilation problems to us. Ethan had made up that story as an explanation for exploring the basement, but now it had backfired. I don't remember saying that. It must be a misunderstanding. Mom, is there something you're not telling us? Is there a problem with the house that we don't know about? I could hear Dylan talking in the background, but I couldn't make out the words. Everything is fine, Haley. It was just a misunderstanding with the plumber. Where are you right now? We can come pick you up. The question sounded like a threat disguised as an offer of help. That's not necessary. I have a ride. But Mom, it's already 7:00. You never stay out this late without letting us know. Haley, I'm an adult. I don't need to ask permission to leave the house. I know, but there was a pause, and I heard murmurs in the background. Dylan wants to talk to you. Before I could protest, Dylan's voice replaced Haley's. Mom, you need to come home right now. His tone had changed completely. He was no longer the concerned son. He sounded authoritarian, almost threatening. Excuse me? You said you were running errands at the bank and shopping, but the bank closed at 5 and you haven't bought anything. Where have you really been? I don't have to explain my movements to you, Dylan. Yes, you do, especially when you start acting so suspicious and strange. Ethan gestured for me to hang up, but I needed to hear how far they were willing to go. Suspicious of what? The plumber told us you were asking very specific questions about ventilation systems, questions that someone would only ask if they suspected something was wrong. My blood ran cold. They had put the pieces together faster than we expected. I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, come home now. We can talk about this as a family. And what if I don't want to come home? There was a long, charged pause. When Dylan spoke again, his voice was ice cold. Then we'll have to come and get you. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. Dylan's words echoed in my head like a direct threat. Ethan looked at me with a grave expression. He had heard enough of the conversation to understand that the situation had escalated dangerously. "Mrs. Sanders, we need to call the police right now. Your children know you've discovered something, and they're willing to take drastic measures to silence you." "Wait," I said, grabbing his arm. "What are we going to tell them? That my children are slowly poisoning me and just threaten me over the phone? It sounds like the paranoid fantasy of an old woman. We have the photos, the physical device in your basement, and I am a witness to the conversation I overheard between them. That's solid evidence." Twist 4. Discovery of a detailed timeline projecting Barbara's deterioration and death. Before he could respond, my phone vibrated again. This time it was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Sanders, we know where you are. The President Hotel downtown, room 203. You have 10 minutes to come down to the lobby before we come up to get you." Terror completely paralyzed me. "Ethan, look at this." I showed him the message with fingers that shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. "How the hell did they find out where you are?" Ethan looked around the lobby nervously. "Did you tell anyone else where you were?" "No, nobody. Only you knew." "Is your truck registered at the hotel?" I suddenly realized. There could be security cameras that showed us arriving together. "It's possible. Or maybe they followed my vehicle when I left your house the second time. If they were already suspicious, they might have been watching." Another message arrived, this time from Haley. "Mom, we know you're at the President Hotel. We don't want to hurt you. We just want to talk, but if you don't come down voluntarily, Dylan is going to come up to your room, and he's very upset right now." "They're here," I whispered, looking towards the lobby windows. "They're somewhere nearby watching us." Ethan stood up immediately. "Let's go. There's a back exit through the hotel restaurant's kitchen. We can get out without being seen." "And then what? I can't run forever. They're my children. They know all my favorite places, my friends, my routines. That's why we need the police to arrest them tonight. Once they're in custody, you'll be safe." As we walked quickly towards the back of the hotel, my phone rang again. This time I answered without looking at who it was. "Mom, why are you running from us?" It was Haley's voice, but it sounded different. There was a coldness in her tone I had never heard before. "We just want to protect you. You've been acting very strangely lately, and we're worried about your mental health." "My mental health is perfectly fine, Haley. What's not fine is what you two have been doing in my house." There was a long pause. When Haley spoke again, she had dropped all pretense of filial concern. "What do you think we've been doing, Mom?" "I think you two have been trying to kill me slowly to inherit my money. And I think when you realized I found out, you decided to speed up your plans." "Those are very serious accusations, Mom. Accusations that might suggest you're suffering from senile paranoia." The way she said senile paranoia made me understand immediately what their defense strategy would be. They would claim I was a confused old woman, possibly with early dementia, who had misinterpreted normal situations and developed conspiracy theories about my own children. "I'm not confused, Haley. I saw the device in the basement. I saw the tubes connected to my room's ventilation system. I saw the chemicals and the timers." "What device, Mom? There's no device in the basement. Just normal plumbing and the ventilation system we installed during the renovation." Twist 5. Barbara and Ethan discover Dylan and Haley have dismantled the evidence and are actively hunting them. Now I understood why they had insisted so much on me coming home. They had used the hours since my disappearance to dismantle the entire system and eliminate the evidence. "Ethan has pictures," I said, glancing at him as we continued moving towards the back exit. "Ethan? You mean the plumber?" Haley's voice dripped with condescension. "Mom, that man is a complete stranger. Why would you believe him over your own children? Doesn't it seem strange that a plumber you'd never seen before today is suddenly filling your head with paranoid ideas about your family?" Her logic was diabolically clever. To any outside observer, It would indeed seem strange that an elderly woman would trust a stranger more than her own children. "Dylan wants to talk to you," Haley continued. "We can sort this out as a family, but only if you stop running and come home." "I'm not going back to that house." "Then I guess we'll have to bring you back." The line went dead. Ethan and I had reached the hotel's back door. He opened it carefully and looked into the alley. It was empty except for some trash cans and a stray cat. "My truck is parked 2 blocks from here," Ethan whispered. "If we can get there without being seen, we can go straight to the police station." We started walking quickly down the alley, but when we reached the corner, we saw Ethan's truck, and someone was standing next to it. Dylan. We stopped immediately and stepped back into the shadows. Dylan had his phone in one hand and what looked like a tire iron in the other. He was looking down the alley, clearly waiting for us. "He knows your vehicle," I whispered. "He must have followed you when you left my house." "We can call the police from here," Ethan said, dialing 911 on his phone. But before he could complete the call, we heard footsteps behind us. We turned and saw Haley blocking our way out of the alley. In her hands, she held something that made my blood run cold. A large syringe filled with a clear liquid. "Hello, Mom," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You've been very hard to find." We were trapped between Dylan and Haley in a dark alley where no one could see or hear us. The syringe in Haley's hands probably contained a concentrated dose of whatever they had been using to poison me gradually, but in an amount that would be fatal in minutes. "Haley, please," I begged. "I'm your mother. I raised you. I love you. How can you do this?" "Love doesn't pay debts, Mom. Love doesn't give me financial stability. Love isn't going to save Dylan from the men who want to break his legs over the money he owes." Her reply was delivered with a coldness that made me understand the daughter I had raised no longer existed. Or maybe she never really had, and I had simply seen what I wanted to see. "You're going to go to jail," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Ethan has evidence of what you've been doing." "You mean these pictures?" Dylan approached from the other end of the alley, holding Ethan's camera. "I found them in his truck. Very smart to document everything, but not very smart to leave the evidence in an unlocked vehicle." My heart sank. Without the photos, we had no physical proof of what they had been doing, and by the time the police could get a warrant to search my house, they would have already removed all traces of the device. "Besides," Dylan continued, "who's going to believe that 2 successful, respectable children murdered their elderly mother, especially when that mother has been showing obvious signs of mental decline and paranoia in recent months?" "You had it all planned from the beginning," I murmured, finally understanding the depth of their manipulation. "Of course we did," Haley said, advancing towards us with the syringe. "Did you really think we were stupid enough not to consider all the possibilities?" In that moment, when all seemed lost and my children were closing in with deadly intent, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world: police sirens, approaching fast. Ethan had managed to complete the 911 call before Dylan arrived and had activated his phone's location feature. Haley stopped immediately, the syringe still in her hands, but with a look of panic on her face. Dylan dropped the tire iron and started walking quickly towards the opposite exit of the alley, but it was too late. 3 police cars appeared simultaneously at both ends of the alley, blocking all escape routes. "Police, put your hands where I can see them," an officer shouted as he got out of his vehicle, his gun drawn. Dylan immediately raised his hands, but Haley seemed to be considering using the syringe on me as a last desperate act. Ethan stepped between her and me, spreading his arms protectively. "Miss, slowly drop what's in your hands and step back," ordered a female officer who had approached from the other side. "It's not what it looks like," Haley screamed, but her voice sounded hysterical. "This woman is my mother, and she's suffering from dementia. We were trying to take her back home for her own safety." "And that's why you needed a syringe?" the officer asked, approaching cautiously. It's It's medicine to calm her down. She's been having violent episodes. But her explanation sounded weak even to her. The officers had seen enough domestic violence situations to recognize the signs of a potential assault. For the next 30 minutes, while Dylan and Haley were handcuffed and read their rights, I sat in the back of an ambulance that had been called to check on my health. Ethan was giving his detailed testimony to a detective, showing the photos he had managed to email to his own account before Dylan destroyed his camera. "Mrs. Sanders," said the lead detective, approaching me after finishing with Ethan, "we need you to come with us to the station to give your full statement. But first, we're going to search your house with a warrant to document any evidence that may still be there." "You won't find anything now," I told him. "They had hours to get rid of everything." "Maybe, but criminals, especially first-timers, often make mistakes in their panic to clean up a scene. Besides, certain types of chemical residues are almost impossible to remove completely." 3 hours later, sitting in an interrogation room, drinking terrible coffee, and giving my testimony for the 3rd time, I received confirmation that the detective was right. They had found traces of the chemicals in my bedroom's ventilation ducts, residue in the basement pipes that had been hastily disconnected, and most incriminating of all, the notebook with the detailed log of my symptoms hidden in Haley's room. Apparently, in their rush to dismantle the physical device, they had forgotten to get rid of the written documentation of their experiment. "Mrs. Sanders," Detective Martinez said, sitting across from me, "I've been a detective for 20 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. Your children had created what amounts to a meticulous medical murder plot." "I still can't believe it," I whispered. "How could they do this to me? I gave them everything." "Sometimes the people we love the most are capable of the greatest betrayal," he said gently. "But the good news is, we have solid evidence. The chemical residue analysis matches the substances described in their notebook. We found digital timer components in the basement trash. And most damning of all, we found Haley's online search history on her laptop. Undetectable poisons, symptoms of gradual poisoning, how to mimic natural illness." "What happens now?" I asked, feeling numb. "They'll be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and assault with a deadly weapon. Given the premeditated nature of the crime and the substantial evidence, they're looking at significant prison time." I nodded, trying to process it all. "Can I see them?" Detective Martinez looked surprised. "Are you sure that's a good idea, Mrs. Sanders? After what they tried to do to you?" "I need to look them in the eyes," I said firmly. "I need to ask them why. I need to understand." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll arrange it, but I need to warn you, they might not be the children you remember anymore. People who go this far, they've crossed a line that changes them." Half an hour later, I was sitting in a small room with a table and 2 chairs. The door opened and Dylan was brought in, handcuffed, accompanied by 2 officers. He looked disheveled, his confident facade crumbling under the reality of his situation. "You have 15 minutes, one of the officers said. Then they stepped back to the corners of the room, giving us the illusion of privacy. Dylan sat across from me, his eyes fixed on the table, unable to look at me. "Why, Dylan?" I asked simply. "What happened to you? What turned my son into someone who could plot his mother's death?" He remained silent for a long moment, then finally raised his eyes to meet mine. There was no remorse in them, only cold calculation. "You weren't supposed to find out," he said flatly. "It was supposed to look natural. You're getting old. People would have just thought it was your time." "My time?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "I'm 65 years old, Dylan. I could have had 20 more years of life." He shrugged, a gesture so callous it took my breath away. "We needed the money now, not in 20 years. The gambling debts," I said. How did it get so bad? For the first time, a flash of emotion crossed his face. Shame, quickly replaced by defensiveness. It wasn't just gambling. I made some bad investments. The construction company is failing. I'm underwater on my mortgage. The loan sharks were going to break my legs, or worse. You could have come to me, I said quietly. I would have helped you. With what? You would have lectured me about responsibility, given me a small loan that wouldn't have covered half of what I owe. This way I get everything at once. The insurance, the house, your savings. The cold pragmatism in his voice chilled me to the bone. This wasn't my son speaking. This was a stranger wearing his face. And Haley? How did you convince her to help you? Dylan's expression hardened. That was her idea, actually. The chemistry part. She came to me when her divorce started going south. Kevin found out she'd been cheating on him for years. She was going to get nothing, and she had maxed out all her credit cards living a lifestyle she couldn't afford. She needed a fresh start. So you both decided I was worth more dead than alive, I whispered. Dylan didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Did you ever think about what you were doing? Did you ever feel guilty watching me get sicker day by day, knowing you were causing it? We did what we had to do, he said flatly. It wasn't personal, Mom. It was just business. Those words broke something in me. My own son referring to my murder as just business. I stood up, signaling to the officers that I was done. Goodbye, Dylan, I said. I don't know who you are anymore, but you're not the son I raised. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. You know what's funny, Mom? If you had just died on schedule, we would have mourned you beautifully, given you the most touching funeral, told everyone what a wonderful mother you were. No one would ever have known the truth. I looked back at him one last time. That's the difference between us, Dylan. I never cared about appearances. I cared about truth. As I walked out, I knew I wouldn't be speaking to Haley. There was nothing more to say, nothing more to understand. My children had made their choice, and now they would face the consequences. Detective Martinez was waiting for me outside. Are you all right, Mrs. Sanders? No, I answered honestly. I don't think I'll ever be all right again. But I'm alive, and that's more than they planned for me. Do you have somewhere to go tonight? Someone who can stay with you? I thought about it. I couldn't go back to my house, not yet. It had become a place of betrayal and pain. I had no close family nearby. Richard's sister lived in Florida, and my own sister and I had drifted apart years ago. I think I'll stay at a hotel for a few days, I said, until I figure out what to do next. I could have an officer drive you, Martinez offered. Thank you, but Ethan, Mr. Rodriguez, offered to take me. He's been a guardian angel through all this. Martinez nodded. He's a good man. Not many people would get involved in something like this for a stranger. We've taken his full statement, so he's free to go whenever you're ready. I found Ethan waiting in the station lobby, looking tired but relieved when he saw me. How did it go? He asked gently. I don't recognize them anymore, I said, my voice hollow. They're not the children I raised. He nodded understandingly. Where would you like me to take you? Back to the hotel? If you don't mind. I can't face going home yet. Of course. And Mrs. Sanders, I meant what I said earlier. I'll help you through this, whatever you need. As we drove through the darkened streets, I stared out the window at the passing houses, each one containing families, lives, stories. How many of them were like mine? How many facades of love hid dark secrets beneath? Ethan, I said quietly, thank you. If you hadn't come to fix that leak today, I would probably be dead in a few months. Don't thank me, he said. Anyone with a conscience would have done the same. But that wasn't true, I realized. My own children had no conscience when it came to my life. In the span of a single day, I had lost the family I thought I had and gained a stranger who cared more about my well-being than my own flesh and blood. Life was full of bitter ironies. 6 months had passed since that terrible night in the alley. The morning air was crisp as I walked up the courthouse steps, clutching my handbag like a shield. Today was the day. After months of preliminary hearings, evidence reviews, and failed plea bargains, Dylan and Haley would finally be sentenced. I had avoided seeing them since that brief encounter at the police station. I couldn't bear to look into their eyes and see the strangers who had replaced my children. But today was different. Today I needed to be there, to witness justice being served, to bring this nightmare to its conclusion. Ethan was waiting for me at the entrance, just as he had promised. In the months since he discovered the poisoning system in my basement, he had become my rock, my confidant, and my friend. He had helped me pack up my house, find a temporary apartment, and navigate the bewildering legal proceedings. "Are you ready for this?" he asked gently, offering me his arm. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "Let's get it over with." Inside, the courtroom was already crowded. The case had attracted considerable media attention. The story of 2 adult children attempting to slowly poison their mother for inheritance money had all the elements of a sensational crime drama. I kept my eyes forward as we made our way to the front row, avoiding the curious stares of reporters and spectators. District Attorney Rosenberg greeted me with a respectful nod. She had been relentless in building the case against my children, refusing to accept any deals that might result in light sentences. "Mrs. Sanders, I just want to prepare you," she said in a low voice. "They'll be brought in shortly. This might be difficult for you." "I understand," I said. "Thank you for everything you've done." The judge entered and we all rose. Then a side door opened and there they were, Dylan and Haley, both in prison jumpsuits, both looking pale and resentful. Dylan had lost weight, his once confident posture now slumped. Haley's hair, which she had always maintained so meticulously, hung limp around her face. Neither of them looked at me, not even a glance in my direction. The proceedings began with formal statements from both the prosecution and defense. Dylan and Haley's lawyers had tried desperately to frame their actions as a misguided attempt to help a mother they believed was suffering from dementia, a claim thoroughly debunked by medical examinations that showed I was perfectly sound of mind. Then it was my turn to speak. I had agonized over my victim impact statement for weeks, writing and rewriting, trying to capture the depth of betrayal I had experienced. As I approached the podium, I finally locked eyes with my children. Dylan's gaze was cold, calculating, still strategizing even now. Haley, on the other hand, had tears in her eyes. Were they genuine or just another performance? I no longer had the ability to tell. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I stand before you today not just as a victim of attempted murder, but as a mother whose entire understanding of her life and family has been shattered. The people who plotted my death are not strangers, but the 2 human beings I brought into this world, raised, loved, and would have given my life for without hesitation." I paused, gathering my strength. For 9 months, they systematically poisoned me in my own home. They documented my symptoms like scientists observing a lab rat. They calculated how long it would take me to die. They planned to divide my possessions while watching me grow weaker day by day. And they did all this while eating at my table, accepting my love, and pretending to care about my well-being. I could feel tears threatening, but I forced them back. I wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. I've asked myself 1,000 times what I did wrong as a mother. What could have turned my loving children into people capable of such cold-blooded cruelty? But I've come to understand that this isn't about my failings as a parent. This is about the choices they made as adults. Choices driven by greed, selfishness, and a fundamental lack of human empathy. I looked directly at Dylan and Haley. I don't hate you. I don't even want revenge. What I want is justice and protection for myself and for society from people who have demonstrated they're willing to commit premeditated murder for financial gain. And I want something you may never be capable of giving, an honest acknowledgement of the pain you've caused and genuine remorse for your actions. I returned to my seat, feeling drained but somehow lighter. Ethan squeezed my hand in silent support. The judge then asked if the defendants wished to speak. Dylan declined, but to my surprise, Haley stood up. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. I don't know how things went so wrong. I was desperate and confused, and I let Dylan convince me this was the only way. I knew it was wrong, but I was too weak to stop it. Please, Mom, I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for your forgiveness." Twist 6. Dylan attempts one final manipulation by blaming Haley. Entirely, Dylan's head snapped toward his sister, rage contorting his features. "What are you doing?" he hissed. Then, turning to the judge, he stood as well. "Your Honor, I need to clarify something. This entire plan was Haley's idea. She's the one with the chemistry background. She's the one who designed the poisoning system. I only went along with it because she convinced me our mother was suffering, and this was a merciful way to end her life." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge called for order. Haley stared at her brother in disbelief. "How dare you!" she shouted. "This was your idea from the beginning. You were the one who said we needed her money. You were the one who threatened me if I backed out." The two of them began shouting over each other, their lawyers frantically trying to silence them. But the damage was done. Their final act in this tragedy was to turn on each other, throwing away any shred of dignity or unity in a desperate attempt to save themselves. The judge's gavel came down hard, silencing the chaos. "I have heard enough," he said, his voice stern. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely encountered a crime as calculated, cold-blooded, and morally reprehensible as this one. The evidence shows clearly that both of you participated fully and enthusiastically in this plot. The betrayal of the most sacred bond, that between parent and child, for financial gain demonstrates a profound moral corruption that this court cannot ignore." He looked at Dylan and Haley with undisguised contempt. "Dylan Sanders, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in state prison for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, attempted murder, and assault with a deadly weapon. Haley Sanders, I hereby sentence you to 20 years in state prison for the same charges, with the possibility of parole after serving 15 years. The gavel came down again, finalizing their fates. As they were led away, Haley looked back at me one last time, tears streaming down her face. Was it remorse? Regret? Self-pity? I would never know. Dylan didn't look back at all. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions, thrusting microphones toward my face. Ethan shielded me as best he could, guiding me toward the parking lot. "Mrs. Sanders, how do you feel about the sentencing? Do you think justice was served? Will you ever forgive your children?" I stopped, turning to face them. They fell silent, cameras still rolling. "Justice was served today," I said simply, "but there are no winners here. Only broken lives and broken hearts. Please respect my privacy as I try to rebuild mine." In the car, the emotional armor I had maintained throughout the trial finally cracked. Tears came in a flood, years of pain and betrayal pouring out. Ethan sat quietly beside me, offering the comfort of his presence without empty words. When I could finally speak again, I looked out at the courthouse receding in the distance. "It's over," I whispered. "It's really over." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "Now you can start to heal." 1 month after the sentencing, I stood in the empty living room of the house where I had raised my family, where I had almost died, where memories both beautiful and terrible lived in every corner. The "for sale" sign had gone up the previous week. I knew I could never live there again. The house that had once been my sanctuary had become a prison of memories and betrayal. Ethan was helping me with the final walkthrough, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. Most of my furniture and belongings had already been sold, donated, or placed in storage. I was traveling light into my new life. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked, watching me as I ran my hand along the mantelpiece where family photos had once stood. "It's a beautiful house, and it's completely yours now." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I can't heal in a place where every room reminds me of what happened. And besides, I don't need this much space anymore." I'd found a small cottage in a coastal town 3 hours away. It was nothing like this suburban family home. It was cozy, quaint, with a view of the ocean from a tiny back porch. A place where no one knew my story, where I could be simply Barbara, not that poor woman whose children tried to kill her. "What about their things?" Ethan asked, gesturing toward the closed doors of Dylan and Haley's old bedrooms. I hadn't been able to face clearing them out. "Their lawyers have arranged for everything to be placed in storage," I said. "They can decide what to do with it all when they get out." The thought of my children emerging from prison decades from now was surreal. Dylan would be in his 60s, Haley in her 50s. I might not even be alive to see it. "The real estate agent thinks the house will sell quickly," I said, changing the subject. "The neighborhood has become very desirable." "That's good. The sooner you can close this chapter, the better." I nodded, taking one last look around. So many memories. Christmas mornings, birthday parties, family dinners, movie nights. The life we had shared in these rooms seemed like a distant dream now, a beautiful illusion that had masked a far uglier reality. "I'm ready to go," I said finally. As we drove away, I didn't look back. That house belonged to another lifetime, another Barbara. The woman I was becoming needed different surroundings, different air to breathe. The coastal cottage welcomed me with the sound of waves and the scent of salt air. It was early spring and wildflowers dotted the scrubby garden. The interior was small but bright, with wide windows that let in the ocean light. Nothing here reminded me of my old life. No familiar furniture, no family photographs, no mementos. Just clean, empty space waiting to be filled with new experiences. Ethan helped me bring in the few boxes I had brought with me: clothes, books, essential kitchenware. His plumbing business was flourishing, but he had taken the day off to help me settle in. "What do you think?" I asked as we sat on the porch with cups of tea, looking out at the waves. "I think it's perfect," he said. "Peaceful. A good place to start over." "I'm 65 years old, Ethan. Isn't it a bit late to be starting over?" He smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "It's never too late, Barbara. My grandmother went back to college at 70 and became an artist. Life doesn't end until it ends." I sipped my tea, letting his words sink in. He was right, of course. I had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at defining who I was and what mattered to me. The poison that had nearly killed me had also, ironically, freed me from illusions and obligations that had shaped my existence for decades. "I've been thinking about taking an art class," I said hesitantly. "There's a community center in town that offers watercolor painting for beginners." "That sounds wonderful." "And maybe joining a book club. I used to love reading, but somewhere along the way I stopped making time for it." The local library probably has one. I smiled at him gratefully. Thank you, Ethan. Not just for today, but for everything. For saving my life, for supporting me through the trial, for being a friend when I needed one most. He looked embarrassed. Anyone would have done the same. No, I said firmly. They wouldn't have. Most people would have walked away from such a complicated, dangerous situation. You stayed. You cared. That makes you exceptional. A comfortable silence fell between us, broken only by the rhythmic sound of the waves and the occasional cry of seagulls. Will you be all right here by yourself? He asked finally. I think so. It's time I learned to stand on my own. I've spent my whole life defining myself through other people. First as a wife, then as a mother. Now I need to figure out who Barbara is when she's just Barbara. He nodded understandingly. Well, I'm only a phone call away if you need anything, and I'll be checking in regularly. After Ethan left, I walked through the cottage again, touching the walls, opening windows to let in the sea air. This space was mine, untainted by betrayal or fear. For the first time in many months, I felt a glimmer of something I had thought lost forever: hope. That night I sat on the porch watching the moonlight dance on the waves. The detective handling my case had told me that Dylan and Haley had both filed appeals, but they were unlikely to succeed given the overwhelming evidence. They would serve their sentences, and I would serve mine, the life sentence of being a mother whose children had tried to kill her. But as the gentle night breeze caressed my face, I made a decision. I would not let their actions define the rest of my life. I would not become bitter or fearful. I would learn to trust again, to find joy again, to live fully again. Not for their sake, but for my own. Climax 3. Barbara receives a letter from prison. Dylan expressing genuine remorse. 3 months into my new life by the sea, a letter arrived. The return address made my hands tremble. State Correctional Facility. For a moment I considered throwing it away unopened. What could either of my children possibly have to say that would heal rather than reopen wounds? But curiosity won out. The handwriting on the envelope was Dylan's, neat, precise, so familiar it made my heart ache. I took the letter to my porch where the sound of waves might steady me and carefully opened it. Dear Mom, I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't blame you if you tore it up without a second thought. But on the slim chance that you are reading these words, I need to say what I should have said months ago. I am sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Not sorry for the consequences. Sorry for what I did to you. Sorry for betraying the love and trust you gave me unconditionally my entire life. Sorry for becoming someone who could look his own mother in the eyes day after day while slowly killing her. There's no excuse for what I did. I could tell you about the gambling debts, the threats, the desperation I felt, but none of that justifies my actions. I made choices, horrible, unforgivable choices, and I will live with the knowledge of who that makes me for the rest of my life. The prison psychiatrist says I have antisocial personality traits. Maybe that's true. Maybe there's something fundamentally broken in me that allowed me to compartmentalize my actions so completely. But I don't want to hide behind diagnoses or explanations. I did what I did with full awareness of the moral weight of my actions. I think about you every day, Mom. I wonder if you're okay, if you found some peace, if you ever think of me as the son I once was rather than the monster I became. I don't expect forgiveness. I haven't earned it and may never deserve it. But I wanted you to know that at least now, finally, I understand the magnitude of what I did. Haley and I are in separate facilities. We haven't spoken since the sentencing. I don't know if she feels remorse. I hope she does. What we did to you was unconscionable. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand. Just say the word and I won't write again. But if someday Even years from now, you could find it in your heart to write back. Even just to tell me you're doing well, it would mean more than I can express. With deepest regret and love still, Dylan, I read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words by the third reading. Was this genuine remorse or another manipulation? After everything that had happened, could I trust anything from either of my children? I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in its envelope. I wouldn't respond. Not now, maybe not ever. But I wouldn't throw it away either. It would stay in a drawer, a reminder that even in the darkest stories there might be glimmers of redemption, however faint. That night I dreamed of Dylan as a little boy, his small hand in mine as we walked through a park. In the dream he looked up at me with innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, will you love me forever?" And I answered, as I had in real life so many years ago, forever and always, no matter what. I woke with tears on my pillow, but also with a strange sense of peace. The love I had given my children had been real, even if the people they became were not who I thought they were. That love was part of me, part of my story. I couldn't erase it, and perhaps I shouldn't try. The seasons changed. Summer faded into fall, fall gave way to winter, and winter melted into spring again. A full year had passed since the trial, since I had started my new life by the sea. My little cottage had become truly mine, filled with watercolor paintings from my art class, books from my weekly book club, and small treasures collected on beach walks. I had made friends in town, not close confidants who knew my full story, but friendly faces who greeted me at the grocery store, saved me a seat at community events, invited me to holiday gatherings. Ethan visited every few weeks. Our friendship had deepened over time, comfortable and uncomplicated. He had become my connection to my old life, but also a bridge to my new one. He brought news from the old neighborhood, updates from the detective who had handled my case, and always, his steady presence and understanding. On the anniversary of the day Ethan had discovered the poisoning system in my basement, I invited him to dinner at my cottage. I had become a better cook over the past year, discovering a joy in preparing meals just for myself, experimenting with flavors and techniques I had never tried during my decades of cooking for a family. "You look well, Barbara," Ethan said as we sat on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. "Really well." "I feel well," I admitted. "Not every day, not all the time, but more often than not. That's progress, I think." "Significant progress," he agreed. "You've rebuilt your life from the ground up. That takes incredible strength." I smiled, accepting the compliment. Learning to acknowledge my own strength had been part of my healing process. "I've been thinking about Dylan's letter," I said. It was the first time I had mentioned it to Ethan, though I had received 2 more since then, each expressing similar remorse and asking nothing of me except perhaps the smallest acknowledgement. "I'm considering writing back." Ethan was silent for a moment, weighing his words. "What would you say?" "I don't know. Not that I forgive him. I'm not there yet. Maybe never will be. But maybe that I'm doing well. That I've found peace. That I'm grateful to be alive." "Do you think that would be helpful for you?" "Maybe. It feels like there's a conversation that was interrupted, that final confrontation in the alley, then the theatrical accusations in the courtroom. Nothing was really said. Nothing was resolved. Not that anything can truly be resolved after what happened, but you need closure," Ethan finished for me. "Yes. Not for Dylan's sake, but for my own. To say, this is what you did. This is how it affected me. But this is not how my story ends." Ethan nodded. "That sounds like a healthy perspective." We watched as the last sliver of sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving behind a sky streaked with deepening blues and purples. "I received a letter from Haley, too, last week," I said quietly. Very different from Dylan's, full of excuses and blame. She's still angry. At Dylan, at her ex-husband, at the legal system, at me for abandoning her. That must have been difficult to read. It was, but also clarifying. It helped me see the difference between remorse and self-pity. I don't think Haley is capable of understanding what she did wrong. Not yet, anyway. Some people never develop that capacity for self-reflection. I know, and I've made peace with the fact that I might never have the daughter I thought I had. That relationship might be permanently lost, but I'm open to the possibility, however small, that Dylan might eventually find his way back to some kind of humanity. The first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. I had learned the constellations over the past year, finding comfort in their ancient patterns and the perspective they offered on human troubles. "Ethan," I said after a comfortable silence, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you." "What's that?" "Why did you risk so much to help me that day? You didn't know me. You could have fixed the leak, gone home and forgotten what you saw. It would have been easier, safer." He was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft with memory. "I told you about my mother, how she died of supposed natural causes that turned out to be my brother's interference. What I didn't tell you was that there were signs beforehand, symptoms that didn't make sense. Comments she made about feeling strange after taking medication my brother had given her. I dismissed it all, attributed it to age and illness." He took a deep breath. "After she died, when I discovered what my brother had done, I swore I would never again ignore my instincts when something seemed wrong. When I saw that device in your basement, I knew immediately what it was for. I couldn't walk away. I couldn't let another mother die when I had the power to prevent it." I reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "You saved my life. You saved yourself too, Barbara. You had the courage to believe me, to leave your home, to face the truth about your children. Many people wouldn't have been able to do that. I suppose we saved each other, in different ways." As night fully descended, wrapping the ocean in darkness broken only by the reflection of stars and the distant lights of ships, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from that terrifying day in my basement to this quiet evening by the sea had been long and painful, but necessary. I had lost much, but also gained something precious, a genuine understanding of my own resilience. Life could be cruel, people could betray, security could vanish in an instant. But also, strangers could become saviors. New beginnings could emerge from endings, and the human spirit could find its way back to joy even after the deepest betrayals. Later that night, after Ethan had gone home, I sat at my small writing desk and began a letter. "Dear Dylan, I received your letters. I've read each one multiple times, trying to discern their sincerity. The truth is, I may never know with absolute certainty whether your remorse is genuine or another calculation. Trust once broken so completely is not easily rebuilt. But I am writing to tell you that I am well. I've created a new life for myself by the ocean. I paint watercolors. I read books. I walk on the beach. I have made new friends. I laugh sometimes. In other words, I am surviving. And more than that, I am finding my way back to joy despite what happened. I cannot offer forgiveness. Not yet, and perhaps not ever. What you and Haley did was beyond ordinary betrayal. You violated the most sacred bond, that between parent and child. You methodically plotted my suffering and death while accepting my love and care. Those actions have consequences that extend far beyond your prison sentences. But I can offer you this. I acknowledge your words of remorse. I accept that people can change, that even those who commit terrible acts may eventually come to understand the gravity of their choices. Whether this is true for you, Only time will tell. I may write again someday, or I may not. Please understand that I need to prioritize my own healing now. Whatever relationship might be possible between us in the future will have to be built slowly, cautiously, and with the full understanding that it will never be what it once was. Take care of yourself, Dylan. Use this time to truly reflect on your choices and who you want to be when you eventually return to the world. That is the best thing you can do for both of us now. Barbara, I sealed the envelope but didn't address it. Tomorrow, perhaps, or next week, I would decide whether to actually send it. For tonight, it was enough to have written the words, to have acknowledged both the past and the possibility, however distant, of some kind of future connection. I stepped outside onto my porch one last time before bed. The moon had risen, casting a silver path across the dark water. I took a deep breath of the salty air, feeling the expansiveness of the night sky above me and the solid earth beneath my feet. I made it, I whispered to the stars. I survived. And in that moment, survival felt like more than enough. It felt like triumph. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? Comment below and share your story with our community. And remember to tell me what city you're watching from. If you enjoyed this story, check out 2 other channel favorites. My daughter's boyfriend looked familiar, then I realized he was my ex, and I discovered my husband's secret life when he disappeared on our honeymoon. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories every week.